And hello, Internet. This is Catherine Fitzsimmons, the owner of BrainLag, and we have here with us David Rae, the author of CROWTOWER. How are you doing tonight, David?
I'm doing very well, and I'm quite excited to be here and to launch my new book. Thank you so much for publishing it and for having the faith in my work and for all of the support you've given me, both with this and with the previous book, Crow Man.
Well, I absolutely loved both books. CROWTOWER, of course, just released yesterday. And tell us about the book.
Ah, so the book is about uh, it's about hell, and it's about living in hell. And hell is ruled by a dark spirit, and he has a high priest and 12 other priests who, when they die, he reincarnates them back to hell. So they live in this endless cycle of hate, murder, revenge, jealousy. And the book is about how you escape from hell. And that sounds a bit um, the story really is about the high priest that is reborn, and they try and how he tries to escape in particular, and some of the things that he does um, to get away and to change his life and to escape his fate, or if you will.
Thank you. So, what were the inspirations for CROWTOWER?
So the Crow Tower is a follow-on from um, Crow Man, where this hell was shown in a slightly different way. It was really more about what it was like to live in a world where the sun is effectively kept in a box, so that all of the power, all of the wealth, things that you and I would take for granted, food, warmth, are all held by this dark spirit, and you only get it at his whim, and only enough to keep you alive so that you don't pass on. There's still some people for him to either torture or to worship him, depending on what he likes. And at the end of the book, um, I don't want to spoil alert, but there's two characters, Utas and Eroi, who seem to have a great deal of connection to the dark spirit. One in particular is the high priest of darkness, and I wanted to explore more about what they were, what it was like to live close to uh, the dark spirit and to live in that world of evil. I think evil is something that we kind of abstract. We like to dish that epitaph around. We call all sorts of things evil. And then the flip side is when we come to understand a lot of the things that we call evil, we start to realize that they're not evil, they're just different. But at the same time, I also think there is something that you there is something that is evil. We can't just dismiss it and say, well, nobody's evil. There's no such thing as evil, because I think there must be. And I kind of wanted to explore ideas of what that was, um, and really, I think I've done that within both of these books, and hopefully, I've done it in a way that's entertaining. And I think the narrative of the books and the characters of the books are the driver of the story, but it's through that narrative and through those characters that these questions are explored, rather than the this the um, there's not a moral in these books. There's not a take-home message. There's not a one-liner. This is the message I want to put across, and I don't think that as an author is my job to do that. My job is to ask questions, to prompt questions, to to explore ideas, and to do that hopefully with the rest of my readers, and to allow them the space and the freedom, I guess, to think about these ideas and come up to their own, with their own answers, but also very, very, very much to entertain and to make it an enjoyable and experience. I don't know if fun is necessarily the right description, but it's an enjoyable thing to read, um, and that's what I've tried to do, and I think I've achieved it to some degree.
I would definitely say so. And you have a very distinctive writing style in both of these books, very like a modern fable. Your use of repetition and incomplete sentences. It's so natural. Do you have any inspirations that kind of fed that writing style?
Oh, I guess so, and I know exactly what you mean. And one of the first things about it is that um, it's written in first person, and the inspiration for the style of writing is the character. So, for example, when I'm writing in the character of uh, Utas, it's especially in the early part of the book, I'm writing in the character of someone who is paranoid, angry, full of hate, murderous, uh, and furious and afraid, and that the language has to reflect that, the way he is thinking. So the broken sentences, the repetition, the the sort of jumps in concentration. That's because that is the character of the narrator that I'm trying to create. And I know that in some cases, and we may have even discussed this at the editorial stage, that there are things that you think, well, that's not really particularly good at English. But that, to my mind, it's not about creating textbook English that I'm trying to do. I'm trying to speak as a 12-year-old child that's afraid that someone's going to poison him or beat him up or stab him in the dark or strangle him or drown him.
Mm-hmm.
That's the voice I want to recreate, not Shakespeare.
Right.
Having said that, the characters are the inspiration for it. There are writers who have had a very similar approach and been very successful to it with it. Um, I can't say his name. Is Suzuki Kara? Uh, is that was that close enough? You know who I mean. Kara and the Sun is his latest book, Remains of the Day. He, when he writes in first person, you are not aware of the author. It's like there's no layer between him and the character you read and yourself. It's like the author is invisible. I think Philip Reeve did this very successfully in Here Lies Arthur, where the narrator is a girl pretending to be a boy, and you have that same sense of fear running through the whole of the narrator's work, and the same intensity. Gene Wolfe does it in every single book he writes. He's just such a brilliant writer. And you can go further back to some of the classics. The Thackeray's Tristram Shandy is another example where, although that's a comic piece, the voice of that is the voice of this ridiculous character. Confessions of a Justified Sinner is another example where the voice is the voice of this self-righteous, person who persuades themselves that to murder their brother is the right thing to do because they are not of the same religious faith as he is. And all of these writers have been an inspiration to me. I'm not sure I live up to any of these writers. I would love to think that I did, but I've taken the idea of what they've done, but not necessarily the language, because each character is different from the characters that I have written. And even within the book, the language that we have when we're talking, when Utas is speaking, is quite different from when Mokito, a young boy, is speaking. And although there's only two viewpoints in CROWTOWER, Utas and Eroi, their thinking changes as their personalities change as they go through their redemption arc. And I like to think that the language changes as we get further into the book, and the sense of paranoia and anger is lost and replaced perhaps by a more reflective way of thinking and a more sympathetic way of thinking in the actual language that they use.
Well, I definitely think it's an apt description to say that when you're reading it, there's no filter between you and the character, and you brought the characters to life so vividly and so beautifully. And that's what I love about both books. I just want to say we have a comment in the chat. Lady Jeanette Thompson says, loved Crowman so much.
Oh, thank you, Jeanette. I'll actually, Jeanette is, I've met Jeanette many times, and she's certainly been a great support to me in my writing and a great encouragement. And I look forward to catching up with Jeanette and listening to what she makes both of my interview and of my book. She's been a very insightful critic and has been very useful as a sounding board in a lot of occasions when we've discussed things. So thank you very much for that, Jeanette. That's really great to hear you, that you're there.
And Kieran Goddard also just chimed in with, sounds fascinating, David.
Well, hopefully it is fascinating, and they're well worth the read. I know that, like I say, I don't think the books are. They're not polemics. They're not lesson books. But I think there are lessons that we can have from them. And I have a Gene Wolfe book in the lavatory, and every time in the lavatory I pick this up and I just flick to a page and I read something and it gives me uplift. I also have both of these books, and I do the same, and I might be blowing my own trumpet here and sounding terribly vague, but I feel as if I can flip through them, find just any random page and read it and feel, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not suggesting that you take my books to the lavatory, but I think that they are interesting books, and they've been certainly interesting to write, challenging to write, and I'm finding it challenging also to write the third one, but it's a worthwhile challenge because it's a challenge that it's made me also go on that same journey that Utas has gone on, and it's made me also think about the world the way Mokito's had to change his thinking about the world. And it's made me also think about what is a world where all power and all wealth is held in the center. And, it's changed the way I think, or made me perhaps more aware of what my thinking really is. And I think that if that can do that for someone else, then I think Okay, I'm going to recommend that you buy my book because I think it is fascinating. Am I allowed to do that?
Absolutely, and I absolutely concur. They are fascinating, and I really enjoyed a line from a launch party we had earlier this year, and we had a guest author on who had written the foreword for that book. And something she said that resonated with me, I think it was from writing workshops or classes that she's given, is that she said that when you're really focused on what you're writing and on crafting a good book, you don't need to consciously think about the theme of the book. That'll just automatically come out as you're writing it. And it sounds very much like that's what happened with both Crowman and Crowtower, because I mean, it definitely feels like you just flung yourself into the world and, let the characters spill their stories onto the pages. And you did mention that they were very challenging books to write. What was the hardest part of writing them?
So I find that, I mean, this is a dark book, and when you explore evil, you can't shy away from it. So there are pretty horrific things happen in this book and in the book and also in Crowman. And they're not graphic books. They're not graphic. There's no gratuitousness in the book, but the scenes are about uncomfortable and unpleasant things. They are about abuse and murder and beatings and unfair imprisonment and false justice and starvation. And to write about these things, even when you can't, even if the writing skirts around it or appears to skirt around it, you as a writer still have to see it. Otherwise, there's no integrity in your writing. And you then need to think about, how can I put this in a way that is palatable, both to me and to my audience. And also, but even when you do that, you know what you're talking about. You have to create that picture in your head. You have to imagine somebody that could kill someone. I mean, or someone that could walk past somebody starving and think nothing of it, or someone who could execute someone in prison and think, well, what do I care? And you have to be in those people's heads and minds and understand them and face up and sort of look it in the eye. And that's really, really challenging as well. And the flip of that is that the book started off really in my head as, my wife said to me, why don't you write a bestseller fantasy novel and she doesn't read any fantasy novels at all, but you would think of the likes of Robert Jordan or George R.R. Martin, and these are huge sellers. They're very lightweight. I don't mean that as a criticism, because having written this, I understand how difficult it is to stay lightweight and to not let ideas and thinking come into your writing. But the flip of that is also, as you explore these themes, you kind of have to also address these themes within yourself. So one of the themes about it is about a very simple theme about how people should be kinder and do the right thing. And they should be kind and do the right thing no matter how hard or difficult it is, or in quite trying circumstances. And I know I don't live up to that. So that's difficult. But also what is quite difficult is to feel that you are giving this message I'm saying there's not a message to it, but you're exploring these ideas, and you don't want to be pompous, and you want to always remember that what you want to do is to entertain. That is the key to everything that you should be doing as a writer, is to remember that someone should read it and think, that was great. And now I know so far we haven't had 1 million readers for any of our books, but I've had plenty of people that have read them and told me, that's great. And I think, again, blowing my own trumpet here, but I think at least at some level I've achieved that. I've managed to have these themes in my book, but also to make it entertaining and something that you can read. You could read it, I suppose, and not get any sort of thoughts or ideas around how life is structured and how we should live our lives, and just read it straightforward as a linear novel that somebody gets on a wagon and goes from one place to another, and arrives at another place and fights some people, and they win, and good triumphs over evil at the end. You probably could read it like that if you want to, but I think you would enjoy it more if you allow these ideas to enter into your thinking and to consider it more. I was speaking to my friend, and I was giving him a copy, and he'd read Crowman, and he was largely supportive but not uncritical. And he said, "Oh, great, this is here, that's great." He says, the more I think about that book, Crowman, the more I enjoy it. That was about a year ago since he read it, and it's still working in his head, and he's still thinking about it. And that's when you're an author and you do these things. It's little things like that really make you think, what, this is worth doing.
Mm-hmm.
This is worth doing. This is worth sitting there going, now what? I've got to edit this now.
Yes.
And as you know, Catherine, I'm far from the either the most diligent or the most effective of editors. And thank you so much for all your patience with my poor spelling and grammar. But writing is a difficult process, but it is worth it.
And honestly, I mean, this is obviously a biased opinion, but I would have a hard time believing someone could read either of the books and not walk away feeling something more than just having taken in a fun or an entertaining story. So yes, I was just saying that there's so much depth in both Crowman and CROWTOWER with the characters, and it's so interesting because the situations that they get into are fairly simple, in terms of what happens to them and, how they react to the world. And yet there's so many layers to their thinking, and I love how all of that came out.
Well, thank you very much. I think that's I'll take that. I'm not sure I entirely agree but you're right. It is in those simple situations that sometimes you have the most challenge, and So, for example, somebody says something that offends you, and if you cut it down to what was actually said, it seems maybe pathetic, but it doesn't change the fact that you're very angry and that you may act irrationally as a result of these things.
Excellently put. So it is almost 5:30 my time. Would you like to take a break from the interview and give us a reading from the book?
Okay. I guess I could do that. In fact, let me rephrase that. I would be delighted to do that. And